Hi everyone, in this session we're going to be looking at what makes an effective website, identifying all the features that a good designed website should have. But before we do, it's always fun and always a bit of a good idea to look at a bad website and actually see what's wrong with it so we can easily spot what's good about a better one. So this is an example of an intentionally bad website. Don't worry, no one's actually done this, no one's actually picked this as a website for themselves and they've chosen to have it. Let's have a little look. I'm sure you'll see exactly what I mean when I put it on screen. Let's have a look. Yeah, just take a second to take that in. Now, obviously it's bad. We know it's bad, but we need to know why it's bad. Now, there are a couple of main things which you should be immediately coming out to your head. Firstly, this bar across the top, which has got a lot of moving information. In fact, the background. Everything on here is moving and it's very distracting. It's distracting from the content on the page. So, constant movement, constantly distracting me away from things I should be looking at is not good. Not a good idea at all. So let's have a look here as well. You can see across the bottom, this text isn't actually too bad to read on this page, but it's not great. The contrast between the text and the background is not good. And also, you'll notice that a lot of this page is kind of red and orange and yellow. The blue doesn't go with it at all. So it's really poor choice of colours. So it's a colour scheme that's very extremely bad. And on the left-hand side, you can see as well, these colours are entirely different. It's really not very good. So as soon as you see here, the white and black text, it stands out from a mile away. If you look at it now, the white and black text is so much easier to read than everything else on this page for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because white on black or white on dark colours generally are very legible. You can see them very easily. And if you notice, the font on this, in comparison to the font on something like this, if you compare the blue to the black, it's so much clearer. So it's substantially easier to read. So picking a contrast between your background and your text is really important. And again, distracting images will be distracting. And if they're running constantly, it's just taking too much away from your attention. So there's lots of issues here. We're not going to talk about playing music on a website. It's not a good idea. Having boxes that are randomly all over the place. We've got random spaces in the page, and you can see here it's all over the place. We've got images that don't load, and as well as that, because there's so much on the page, it's possible that it takes a very long time to load in the first place, which is, again, a really major issue, and you can see download time is mentioned on here. If you want to have a look at this website, I'll leave this on the task, or in the tasks, so you can have a look yourself and have a laugh at how bad it is, but learn about all the things that you should be doing instead. So let's look at the main things that a good website should have. So the good things really are an easy to use navigation. I'm going to keep referring back to this website whenever we need to. There's no navigation at all actually, which is just terrible. But navigation, what I mean by that is if you've got a web page, just to use this box as an example, you might have a bunch of buttons across the top, which take you to a home page, a contact page, an about us page. That's clear and sensible use of navigation because you can click on a page and you know exactly where you're going. Effective use of colour scheme, I mentioned a few minutes ago. You really want to keep your colour scheme limited. Having loads of different colours and making it look very pretty like a rainbow isn't professional, I'm afraid, because it's not clear. You don't have a consistent style. If you think about the companies that are really successful, your Apples, your Microsofts, things like that, they have a very limited colour set, and if you look out for it, you'll see it. So Apple's obviously use very muted colour sets. But even something like the BBC, if you think the BBC, you think red because their logo is red. So it really does help with that. Consistent house style kind of ties into this. Consistent house style, and I'll go back to the page to really make this point. Consistent house style means having everything that makes sense. So for example, this font is a good font, but they've used loads of different fonts throughout the page. They should really be sticking to one or a few fonts that go well together. So that's a really bad use of house style. They also don't have a logo, but when we talk about house style, we should have a logo which matches the colour scheme of the page. We should be making sure that everything is in keeping with itself. So everything looks like it should be there. Nothing should be random. Easy to use layout is fairly obvious, really just making sure that the content on page makes sense, there's nothing in random places, and making sure that content is appropriate. You don't have random nonsense, like for example, a cowboy on a horse. Quick load times, as I mentioned earlier, quick load times are really important. It's estimated that if you have to wait more than 5 seconds for a page to load, I think I read as much as 80% of people will just not bother waiting. You can understand it with some things, like even if you're playing a game, it takes an extremely long time to load. You notice, you become aware of it, and it takes you out of the experience of the website, and it irritates you. And a lot of people, if it's waiting for any longer than about 10 seconds, a lot of people will just think the website's broken, especially if their internet is decent. So it's something to be aware of. Not cluttering the page with too many images or videos, because then it'll make it faster to load. And then having functionality that makes sense. So if you've got, I'll show you on the King Charles website in a minute, but if you have features that are interesting, that are actually valid and useful, then it's absolutely fine to have them, because they do make the site a bit more manageable, a bit more interesting. So let's have a little look at our website. This is a slightly older screenshot, but our website is a good one to look at, because we can just sort of, well, it's not biased, is it, at all, I'm sure. Let's talk about the features that we've got. I'll put them on word by word. Navigation is nice and clear because we've got this bar across the top. That bar is always at the top and it's always there. It's nice and obvious to know where that is. Colour scheme is not super strong on the website at the moment. I think it's slightly stronger on the website than we've updated it since. But you can kind of tell the colours are consistent. We've got a lot of white and black, and whenever the colours are used, they're coming from this logo. And if you go onto the website, go into something like students, you'll notice that the colours do match the logo, and that's because of the house style again. We want everything to look consistent, like it should always have been there. So you could almost link those two together. The layout, it's a home page. So the home page is selling the school, isn't it? So we can see that the main image on the back, but you've also got your main features across the top. And if you want to scroll down, you've got those there. The layout here makes sense. And the content makes sense too. It'd be useful if we could see the actual names of these articles, but it's only a small scroll down, so we won't hate them too much for that. And the load times, you have a go loading the website yourself. It's not too bad. It's actually pretty quick considering how many images are on page. And the functionality, you can have a look at the website if you want to, but we've got this little box. If you click on it, it flicks to that new image. It's not the most exciting feature in the world, but it does add a bit of interest, and something a little thing like that can make a big difference. So there you go. So your task this week, I'm going to ask you to look at 3 pretty major websites that are obviously Apple's, Microsoft and BBC's. And I want you to go through these different features and see what you can see in these websites. So I mean, off the top of my head, I would assume that, Apple, their colour scheme's obviously quite muted, so therefore that's possibly quite professional. You might think why they've done that, and you might say that one's best for that reason. There's no right or wrong when it comes to this, by the way. It is your personal preference. I would suggest that something like BBC has a lot of content to go through because it's a news platform, but it's also a lot of other platforms in there as well. So the layout of that's going to have to be really, really tight and really efficient to get that much content in. So that'll be something that would need to be considered. So, bear these things in mind as you're going through the page. Check the load time, see which loads quickest. It depends on the image qualities and things like that, but have a little look. And if you do need any idea of any of these sort of keywords, I've kind of highlighted the boxes on the knowledge organizer here, which will also attach to the lesson notes. Use these if you're unsure about what the difference is between something like house style and color scheme is. What does functionality mean more specifically? You've got these notes available to you if you need them. Okay, let me know how you get on. Of course, as always, if there's any issues at all, please let me know.